Good day! So we are now on our part 3 of our cost concept, the computation of process costing. So our learning objectives for this topic is number 1 is to define what is process costing, to define what is equivalent unit of production, to learn how to compute for equivalent unit of production, and to learn computation of process costing. So, what is process costing? Process costing is usually used when there are mass production of similar products, where the cost associated with individual units of output cannot be differentiated from each other. So, meaning, process costing is when we do a lot of activities that are usually go on the process, but the number of which is too much. We cannot count it. We cannot determine which jar would be costing this one. So it's like mass production. So it can be computed the average cost per unit by dividing the cost or the production for a particular period by the number of unit produced during the period. So normally the computation is when we just had to determine how many number has been produced out of certain cost. Okay? So, what are the purpose of process costing? Why do we need to do process costing? Number 1, it controls the process so that we would determine what are the capacity of each of the equipment that we are using. Next, we will also know the cumulative cost because normally a business would have one department and then the second department. For example, if we have shampoo, we would first produce the ingredients or the things like, for example, in Procter & Gamble, there are a lot of different shampoo. Normally, they have the same products or same ingredients that will be subdivided in the future, but would have a different sachet. So, the mixing would now be having accumulated cost for that mixing, and then there would also be a certain cost for some of the activities other than that, like putting it on the bottle or on a sachet. Okay? Next, to calculate the value of the inventory of raw materials, work in process, finished goods at the end of the period. Lastly, to use the assigned price of the product. So, there are two types of process costing. We have the first in, first out costing method, and then we also have the weighted average method. Previously, there is also the LIFO or the last in, last out. However, the IFRS and the IAS does not anymore recognize LIFO. Okay, so let's try the example. For example, we have the beginning work in process inventory and conversion costs at 22,000 units, 40% completed. So take note, it is already completed prior to the next activity. Next, you have units started this period, 10,000. And then we also have the work in process ending inventory. So we have now 5,000 and only 20% completed. Let's compute for the EUP. The conversion cost ending is 25% completed. Okay? So, let's see. Take note, we have the beginning inventory 3,000. Then, we also have started and finish. So, started and transfer 3,000. So, we do the T account. So, we have beginning 3,000 and then started and transferred 10,000. So, we have beginning 3,000 and take note, it was said that we have 5,000 ending inventory. So, from those started and transfer, only 5,000 were finished. Okay? So, you just do the squeeze period for the started and transferred. So, you know now that the beginning inventory is finished and the started and transferred would compose of two things. It is the finished one and the one that would also compose your ending inventory. It was stated that the beginning is already 60% completed. So, an additional material would be added to complete it is only now 40%. So, that's why for material, we have 1/8. Okay, that's 40% of 3,000, 1/8. For the direct labor, the same. So, it's also 40%. And for our factory overhead, also the same 40%. So, that's 1/8. And take note, those that are started and transferred would have 100% because it don't have yet the beginning materials that has been added to the product. So, 5,100, 5,000 for the direct labor, and so with the factory overhead. Then, our unfinished or the ending inventory, it said that it is 20% completed. And take note, we multiply it by 20 because it only ended on that period. So, you cannot put 80 because the 80% would now be added on the next activity. Okay? So, that's why you have 5,000 times 20, you have 1,000. And then for our direct labor, it said it's 25% completed, so 1,250. And for our factory overhead, we also have 1,250. Okay, so our EUP now for material, we have 7,800. For direct labor, we have 8,050. And for our factory overhead, we also have 8,050. This is for the FIFO. However, for the weighted average, we presume that all the beginning were already added 100%. So take note, we have now the beginning and then the started. So we have 3,000 and we did not put the 3,000 because at the weighted average, we did not anymore consider the beginning inventory. So we have now started 10,000 and started is composed of 2. Take note, the ending which is 5,000. So we just deduct it. So we know that 8,000 would now be finished. Okay, so 8,000 times 100, 8,000, and we all just combine the direct labor and the factory overhead since we know that this is the conversion cost, the means to convert the material into the finished product. So 5,000, it's still 20% because only 20% of the material were added, and 80% would be added back on the next process activity. So we have now 1,000 and then 25%, 1,250. So for our weighted average, our EUP for material is 9,000 and for conversion cost, it's 9,250. Okay? So let's now assume the following. The work in process has accumulated cost of 6,180 for the beginning. And then the direct material issued amounted to 1,300. Direct labor at 7,200 and manufacturing overhead at 6,000. Okay, so let's now do the cost computation per unit. So take note, we still have the same direct material at 7,800 per EUP. And then the direct labor and the factory overhead both have 8,050. Cost added at this period, at the moment it was produced, 1,300 for material. So we divide 1,300 by 7,800 so that we would determine that the per unit is only 17 cents for the direct material at that period. Then we also have the direct labor, 7,200. We divide it by 0.18 by 8,050. That's 0.89. And for our factory overhead, we have 0.75. Okay. Okay. So we already have, it's still the same EUP. We have 7,800 and then 8,050 per both our direct labor and factory overhead, or you could also just combine it under conversion cost. So we know that the cost of beginning work in process or the cost transfer to the next department is 6,180. You could, if it's given per different, you could also divide it. Okay. Next, so for this period, we have the beginning. We know it's 0.17. We just only round it up to this 2 decimal point. But if you are using the calculator, just what I did, since I use Excel, so it would be 0.166667. So that's therefore 0.17 times 1/8, that would be 300. Just infinite decimal point so that we would be able to get the exact amount. Then 0.17 times 5,000, that would be 8,333.33. And then for the ending, that's 166.67, so that you will be able to know if the question would be how much is the beginning, how much material is added at cost for the beginning. So for the direct labor and factory overhead, we have different amounts. So we have 0.89 times 1/8, so that's 1,609.94. For our finished and started, we have 5,000 times 89, that's 4,472.05. And then for our ending inventory, that's 1,118.01. So for our factory overhead, we have 0.75. So 0.75 times 1/8, that would be 1,341.61. And then 0.75 times 5,000, that's 3,726.71. And 1,250, times 0.75, 931.68. But guys, remember that the 0.75, I used the infinite number because I was using Excel. Because you might get misled if you would see that this is not exact. Okay? Because accountants are normally wanted exact. So if you would check, it's still the same amount of the total amount being transferred, which is 20,680 when we add it up. Okay? So for our weighted average, you could see we have a higher amount. So for our material, we have 22 because there's no beginning inventory to speak of. Okay, so 0.22, it's still also infinite. So 0.22 times 5,000, that would be 1,083.33. And 0.22 times 1,000, that would also be 2,116.67. And then 1.15 times 5,000, that would be 5,760. And then 1.15 times 1,250, that 1,440. And then 0.96 for our factory overhead, that's 4,800 for our finish and started. And then 1,200 for our ending. Then when we add it up together with the beginning, that would also be 20,680. Okay, so these are the amount that we would be transferring on the next department or on our finished goods. And then the ending would be transferred to the next process. So if you like this video, please help me reach out more people by clicking the hit and the subscribe button below. God bless you all, and if you have questions, you just comment it and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Bye!